Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Today on the Develop Yourself podcast, I got my buddy Zubin, the other half, maybe the better looking half of Parsity. I don't know. Today, we're going to talk about an article from a software engineer that we're both familiar with. He actually, I think, works at Google, or maybe used to work at Google. Adi Osmani, prolific writer, just has amazing takes and information that he writes about software and like front-end web development specifically. And he has this article, The 70% Problem, Hard Truths About AI-Assisted Coding. It really just breaks down these warped expectations using AI-assisted coding nowadays. And we're all learning this in real time. This is like a really tremendous shift in the way we write software. And on one end of the spectrum, we have people like, you don't need to write code at all, and you could just use AI-assisted coding. And if you're not doing it right, oh, you just need better prompts. And on the other spectrum, we have people say, don't ever use it at all, and you should just rely on manual coding. And I just want to talk to Zubin. You're a senior software engineer. You've been doing this for a while, so you used to work at Google. And I really want to break down my experience, your experience with these AI-assisted coding tools, and like, what is the reality of using these things nowadays?
I mean, I will say that the AI is the worst it's ever going to be, right? It's only going to get better. Okay. So it's 100% useful. But look, I think I said this in a previous podcast of mine. If you give a Formula One car or a superbike to someone who's only ever driven on the streets of, some city, there's going to be problems, right? Can they operate it? Yes. Can they operate it safely? Almost certainly not. And that's the big difference, right? Like, there's a reason why even forklifts need training. You need to be trained and licensed to, this stuff is powerful stuff. And it's not powerful because it can cause you physical harm. It's powerful because it can fool you into thinking you've done something better than you actually have. Yes. Or worse. And now we come into a problem. Like, so Adi actually wrote another article. So I think the one about 70%, problem solving is from late last year from memory. And then a couple of months ago, he wrote another one about basically titled, vibe coding is not an excuse for, rubbish work, or, is not an excuse for bad quality work. And the point is this, which is most people who are vibe coding don't know enough to quality control it. It comes down to that. And because of that, you have all this, in fact, even yesterday, one of the guys from Taro, he mentioned that the problem that we're now seeing is that when code review time happens, there's so much rubbish code that needs to be cleaned up. So much crud, right? That needs to be cleaned up. That's the problem. It's never been a question about, because software engineering is not about writing code, Brian. You know that. Like, that's what it looks like. It's not about the writing of the code, right? Just like writing a book is not about writing words down in a piece of paper. It's the craftsmanship. That's the job, and we're losing that.
That's the really scary part to me. And we've lowered the barrier to entry, which is a double-edged sword, because now anybody with an idea can, spin up an app. Is it going to work or be scalable? No, absolutely not. But they can spin up something that looks really, really good. And it gives this illusion that we're being super productive. And I'm feeling this in real time because I'm at a company with some younger CEOs who are not technical, and they're thinking, oh my God, we've unlocked like the secret to productivity with AI. And I actually shared this article with them and my whole team, because what he addresses is this 70% myth. Like, you can get 70%, some arbitrary measure, like pretty far ahead. You can scaffold things, you can build it at speed. Like, honestly, the CEOs made a better looking prototype than I could have using V0, Vercel's V0. But that 30% is where the tool becomes not only less efficient, but like almost feels like it's actively working against you, right? Like, hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode. Now, you know that I own an anti-boot camp with my buddy Zubin, an ex-Google software engineer. If you're interested in not just learning how to code, and you know it's going to take more than 3 months, and you're serious about making a transition into a career in software, and you want to work with people that have done it before and are currently working in senior plus levels, join me and Zubin at parsity.io/inner-circle. You can learn all about our philosophy, how we approach learning how to code and switching careers in a much different way, and how we have so much gosh dang success. If you're interested in being one of the few people that works with us this year, go and apply at parsity.io/inner-circle. And now back to the episode. I've used Cursor enough now, Mike. I think you were using Cursor before me. Are you having the same experience where you're like, oh man, I'm flying. Constantly. And then at some point you're like, now it's just faster for me to write the code.
Yeah, constantly. And in fact, it's faster. If I do the math, it was probably better for me as an engineer to have done the research and taken the time to know how to build it from scratch than for me to have relied on it. Because when it comes debugging time, I burn all the time I saved anyway. I lose it. Right. And just trying to fix it. And here's the other thing that I think, this is my theory, right? Because of the way AI LLMs need to be trained on data, it's naturally going to be better at anything that is already visible in the browser, which is pretty much all front-end code, right? Yes. If it's visible in the browser, that means it's on a website. It's literally part of the text of the website, right? Which means it's easily trained because it's public data.
Yeah.
Challenge is all the stuff that happens over the wire and in the back end. It routinely, and I work more on the back end, it routinely completely screws it up and sends me down these horrible rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And I swear at it. Like, I'm like,
I get pissed sometimes. I get super pissed.
Yeah, because it's setting these expectations, not delivering, and then costing me time because I planned my day on the basis that it's going to boost my productivity. But I will say, productivity-wise, I don't think, I think it does help. And there's a big difference. There's a difference between productivity and there's a difference between quality, right? Productivity-wise, no doubt. It saves me on research time because I know what I'm looking for. And then it does kind of cost me time when it screws things up and it's really messy and all the rest of that. That's true. But that could have happened even on my own. Like, that's the reality of it. But productivity being, the fact that I can, so to your point and to Addy's point, if 70% of it can be done, and this is the key point for people who think, it's some sort of panacea or magic bullet. It'll save you a ton of keystrokes, but it won't save you the work that you would have always had to do anyway, which is the engineering work. So there's a difference between writing code and engineering, right? The engineering work is the hard stuff. That's the last 30% that, Addy seems to be talking about. That stuff is not going to save you right now, unless it's completely a toy app, something that's done 100 times. Can it do a shopping cart application from a front end and stylize it? 1000%. Can it do a YouTube clone? 1000%. But how many companies are doing that? Very few companies need to do that. That's not the real world,
And maybe you can help me articulate this, because we work with tons of people that want to get into software or that have gone to boot camps, and they're looking at this and they're like, I'm doing a YouTube clone, which I'm like, yeah, that's a necessary step to help you build software. Like, you have to take stepping stones. But then they're looking at something like, but Cursor just does it. So what's the point of me doing it if that tool just knocks it out already? And I'm like, you don't know what you don't know yet. It's almost like you have to get to a point, and you're going to help me articulate this because you're more eloquent, that you understand, these building blocks, these patterns, so that you can then use something like Cursor. Yeah. But if you use it too early in the game now, you're going to miss over these vital steps, these important learnings, and debugging and bashing your head against a wall and getting stuck and having to go through documentation. You're going to lose all that. And then you're going to be not really, one, maybe not even hireable. Two, if you get hired, I don't think you have a career.
Totally. 1000. I mean, we've all experienced this in school. There are practice problems and there are simulations of real life. And then there's real life. And we always know there's a big gap, like, between the simulation and real life. Doctors practice in cadavers. Musicians learn Beethoven and some other, artist or whatever and practice their stuff. And first you learn by copying, right? Then you got to close the gap with real life. Like, anybody who thinks that, hey, just because I can play Beethoven sonata on the piano means that I can go and compose music is missing a very big step, which is the trial and error piece, right? And that's all a YouTube clone is. It is instruction by using an illustrative example of some of the key widgets, right? Doesn't mean that when you're having to build that out in your own, unless it's exactly the same thing, doesn't mean that you encounter the same problems. And the problems with any simulated environment is it is fundamentally excluding all the wrong paths that you would go down. It just gives you the curated happy path, right? That's what a simulation will end up doing, but that's not what real life is. And that's why real life is so hard to teach. It doesn't matter what it is, driving school, whatever it is. There are some skills where, practically you need to be out there in the field, even if you're a shooter or a golfer, you're out in the range, you're practicing stuff, but then there's no one that's going to tell you that just because you fire a firearm only in a shooting range means you can handle a live situation where, where if you're in the armed forces or the police or something, it's completely different, right? And that's what engineers need to understand. Now, interestingly, I'd ask the question for all the people who are excited about vibe coding, it's very rarely actual engineers. The people most excited about vibe coding, if you notice,
entrepreneurs.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they save money and they save time. And they also have the benefit of thinking, hey, I can get 80% of their on the prototype. So it's entrepreneurs, it's people who want to be engineers, who are, but who feel excluded by the engineering community because they haven't made the cut. Understandably, they're a bit bitter about that or rancid about it. And so they say, hey, vibe coding, I don't need this, right? They're the ones who are most vocal. Actual engineers are very cautious about vibe coding. They're optimistic but cautious, as opposed to the others who just like this is gonna change everything. It is gonna change everything, but not the way we think.
Oh man, I saw it was on Reddit. Again, I got to stay off Reddit. And there's a meme on there, and it's one of those vibe coding like chat threads, whatever. And it's like somebody that obviously was kind of dismissed or felt dismissed by the coding community, and was like, asking a question like, "What happens when you ask a question on Stack Overflow and people berate you and make you feel stupid?" And they're like, "Ha ha ha! This is why you need coders and stuff." And now they're like showing that, hey, now I can do that same thing with vibe coding, and I don't need you anymore. And I do get that. We have kind of created a bit of a snooty culture in some ways within software engineering. Stack Overflow definitely was not what I would consider like a welcoming place for people. And a lot of times software engineers can be dismissive. And, I think the soft skills have obviously become much more important for us to have. But yeah, you're right. I'll take this kind of hot take. I do agree that most entrepreneurs should probably vibe code their way to a prototype if
1000%.
possible, and then finally hire some software engineers. I'm not kind of the school of thought like, no, you should never touch that code. I've seen how far V0 can get. I tried to have my son, by the way, do something in V0. I said, hey son, I'm going to show you this. You got to see this. And I said, what do you want to make? A game. I'm like, cool. Try it in V0. Just breaks. Doesn't work at all. Nothing works. And I was so disappointed.
I was getting excited. I was thinking maybe.
Me too.
Okay,
I wanted to sell on coding. It didn't just not work. We did 3 different prompts, and I'm using the paid version of this. I use the paid version of Cursor. I've used the paid version of ChatGPT. I'm willing to pay for these services in general. I was shocked that, here I am trying to do what I consider something fairly simple, and it didn't render anything. It just broke immediately, a very simple game. And then I did actually a video. Yeah. There's a video that I put out on YouTube a couple days ago. It's doing pretty well, which is unusual. And it's about me live trying to vibe code my way through a fairly simple feature in a prototype I'm building. It's just a prototype, nothing major. It's less than 100 files, and it doesn't do it. And people are watching it, and some people are saying, "Oh, you should have made a better prompt." The typical kind of defensive answer: "You should have done a better prompt," or no, you got to have this tool on top of it. And that leads me to this other thing. We're getting AI SaaS bloat. One person told me, because they're having the same problems with Cursor that we're all having.
And when you say SaaS, you mean software as a service, right?
Software as a exactly. So I have a Cursor subscription, and I love Cursor. I'm not here to diss it or anything. But somebody says, oh, well, that 30% problem, well, there's another tool now that solves that. And I'm like, I don't want 100 AI tools to write code, because then I'm not doing what I like doing.
Yeah. No, and here's the question for you, right? Like, if all these people who are saying, hey, look how it built this and it's amazing and all the rest of that, is it possible that they just happen to get a result because it's a non-deterministic outcome, right? Like, even with the identical prompt, there's no guarantee that the AI is going to come up with the same response, because it's not that's what makes AI generated responses so hard to test. It's non-deterministic, which engineers like us struggle with when we have to test it.
That's right.
Is it possible that a dead clock is showing the right time twice a day and people are getting excited? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, this is so new. It's really hard to know. New. Yeah. But like, what do you think, like, is the future as far as, and maybe when I mean the future, like, what are the skills basically that a young early career developer still needs to know? Because I'm getting nervous that we're bringing up a generation of people. I don't want to sound like the old guy, but I feel like we're bringing up a generation of people that maybe have lost the craft of software engineering and either won't be able to get in the industry and have these strange expectations, or their expectations aren't aligned with reality. And then we're going to either lose a generation of people because we're senior software engineers. We're not going to be writing code forever. Who's going to replace us, and what do they need to know, do you think?
Oh, man. So interesting you asked this question. So just on the weekend, I finished recording a podcast, which will come out middle of this week, where it was actually about, how recently Microsoft laid off about 6% of its workforce, like 6,000
That's right.
people, 3%. And it was all about, software engineers. And if you do the math, 53% were software engineers, which means 47% weren't software engineers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I'm analyzing, what Microsoft said in their report late last year. I think it was mid last year, May 2024, about, changes at the workplace, how I can't remember now, but it's in the podcast, about 68% of people are burnt out, 70 something percent of managers are going to hire for AI skills. And I called out that this thing about AI skills is a catch-all phrase that means nothing, right?
Means nothing.
Means nothing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
What it means to a musician is very different to what it means to a software engineer, is very different to what it means to an AI software engineer, very different to what it means to a machine learning engineer, very different for what it means to a sales rep, right? Like AI skills means very different things for different people. So people get excited about all this and they think it's some sort of major, So I guess to answer your question, Brian, about what the future is, it really comes down to your goals, right? There is no question that AI is going to be part of the tooling. Now, I remember a time when I started my career in law, almost a quarter of a century ago, where there were still pools of stenographers and typists in every law firm because the then senior lawyers and partners weren't fast enough. Right. On the typing, they did the one finger typing because they didn't grow up typing, whereas our generation grew up typing. And so now most law firms have much smaller, if any, pools of these folks because people are doing their own typing. Right. Now, that's what's going to happen in terms of the engineer is going to end up having to work with AI to get things done faster. But the judgment layer, and this is my terminology for it, right? There's a judgment layer involved in any work, whether it's software engineering or being an accountant. There is a judgment layer. And I think people delegate the judgment layer to the AI at their own risk. Right? Whether you're looking for a personal psychologist, a ChatGPT psychologist, whether you're looking for a ChatGPT lawyer, whether you're looking for a ChatGPT coder, you delegate that at your peril because it is not in a position to judge, right? If something doesn't know the time of day and day of week it's not in a position to judge. That's just my rule for it, okay? And it's ridiculous to think that we can delegate judgment. So I think what's going to happen is, and I think it's already happening actually, and not just in software engineering, we're seeing a generation of junior practitioners in any profession where AI is making an impact, and there are lots of them, lose the ability to make judgment, right? To interpret data, make judgment, do the research, form an informed point of view. We entering a habitual copy and paste without knowing what the hell I'm copying and pasting sort of environment, which means in 5 years or 7 years when they stop being on the tools, because let's face it, over a 30-year career, most software engineers, or not most, a lot of them will not continue to be on the tools. Right, they will get into higher level areas of impact, and I'm coding much less today than I did 3 years ago, much less. Right?
Oh yeah.
That's the nature of the job as you rise up. So coding's clearly not the most important thing. Okay, in which case, as you rise up the ranks, it's judgment, it's pattern detection, it's that experience that comes from having made mistakes, trial and error. We learn. I talked about this on LinkedIn. We learn the same way the AI does. Trial and error. The only difference is the AI does billions of reps in an hour, whereas we take a lifetime to do that. That's the difference, but it's the same trial and error loop, right? So that's what's going to happen. We're going to have an entire cadre of a generation of young practitioners without the experience to move into judgment. Into management.
That's something I didn't even think about, but that's a really important one because I'm thinking about what you do, what I do, even as a senior engineer now at a small company. I was writing up docs recently about the organization structure or about the Git branching structure and kind of my thoughts on well, here's how I think we should organize ourselves as a team. Here's how I think work should be divided. And we have an internship at Parsity and all the students in it, we ask what the takeaway is. It's never oh my God, I learned so much new coding standards or anything. Right. It's oh my God, I've never really had to use, Jira or Asana. Communication how to tell somebody, hey, I'm struggling with a bug. I can't quite figure this out.
Right.
When do I use AI? How do I use it? Oh man, is this Git branch? Is this okay for me to push up? Who's going to review it? Oh, this review had way more comments than I expected. It's always about all these things outside of like the writing of the code. It's
Always.
always.
I'm having this discussion at the moment where we're trying to design a basic prototype to see whether it's worth moving into further, and and it's to do with AI. It's to do with the model context protocol and stuff that you and I've talked about.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, and I'm like, there's an entire bunch of folks who want to build an API server that will respond to it, which is what most engineers would want to do. And my question is like, but why? Because that means there's a whole surface area of rate limiting, authentication, authorization. Then you have to maintain the server-side code. I said if we could co-locate the database with the actual tool, which is a package, and if the database is actually with it, we don't need an API, and it's all public data anyway. Now that's a question that stops people in their tracks, because they're like, actually, why did we go down the like? Do we really need the API? And it prompts the right discussion. Do we need an API? Right? Do we need a hosted API for this? And that's the kind of thing that, unfortunately, that takes judgment, and it takes the experience of having gone through building an API server, making it publicly accessible, and then defending the darn thing from the attacks of the internet. It's only when you've done that you're like, oh my God, I don't want to repeat that pain again. How do I avoid
that? Right.
How do I avoid having to expose my flank to that kind of, surface area of constant maintenance, attack, and vulnerability? That only comes from experience, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, because when you hire a senior developer, it's rare that you're strictly hiring for coding skills alone. In fact, I just haven't had that experience as a manager or as myself on the market, where I've been hired like, oh my God, you passed the coding exam and now you're hired. Here's all the money. Here's that big bag of money you wanted. It's more about like, okay, we see you fitting in on the team. Oh, you could also lead the team. Oh, you know about product a little bit. We can see you fitting in all these different areas here. Yeah, that is the piece that I think people are absolutely missing from this in general. And those are much more interesting problems to solve, like the one that you had to solve. Like that's a really interesting one. But you're hiring for experience a lot of times. And if you just offload all that experience, you try to take this shortcut, you're going to end up in a rough position. In fact, there was a tweet, I don't know if it's real or not, but the guy said, we hired a junior engineer and they worked out really great for a few weeks. They got progressively worse throughout the time, because as the feature they wrote had more bugs, more things to add on top of it, it was very clear that they were working completely using AI, and they were a victim of this 70%, rule that Adi Osmani talks about in the article, where like they got really far, but then when they had to go back and refactor it or add more code or work in a larger code base, they just couldn't keep up. And it was like obvious that, they reached the limits, the rate limits of their AI tools, and they got fired.
Yeah, it's so Adi Osmani, I just pulled it up. The other article where he talks about vibe coding is is not an excuse for low quality work. He's got the screenshot of this tweet by I am developer, so not even developer, right? I am developer, and the tweet says vibe coding, comma, where 2 engineers can now create the tech debt of at least 50 engineers. So true. Like spot on, right? That is so freaking true. That is so funny. That's what's happening. And for folks who are listening to us, like it's all right at a junior level if you're doing mainly front end code. Like I said, I think because the internet, the way websites work, all the code is public. Like it'll learn, it'll be good quality stuff. But as Brian said, it'll get things wrong. Even V0, which is this vaunted sort of savant like AI that does all the front end stuff, gets things wrong. I've never used AI for anything in my entire career so far, and I use it every day, where it gets things right. It just doesn't. And I think at the back end, and the more obscure sort of work you're doing, the less density of information out there on the internet, it's just not going to get it right, especially with training windows and stuff like that. Now, of course, there are ways you can fix it. You can, add stuff to the context window. You can do all kinds of, you can add more context by, inside your cursor or your VS Code or whatever it is. But it still doesn't have the volume of training data that you could reliably say, this is what's going to happen. Now, just as an example, when I was at Google, there were things that I had to do that you couldn't Google for. Like that was the irony of it. Right? Because it is completely internal. It was so niche. Yeah. It was hard. And you have to figure things out from first principle. And of course, it's going to take weeks. It's going to take weeks. Like there were 6 people across Google who knew the answer to what I needed, and I had to find them, And that's a skill that people don't talk about now. Is that an absolute marginal sort of edge case, 1000%. But that's actually the edge cases, I believe, is where the future engineer is going to have value, because a lot of the other stuff will be taken up by the AI.
Yeah,
if you're just
for
building
sure.
a simple form, AI is going to do that for you, right?
And I love that it does that, by the way. I mean, I'm a fan that it does a lot of this stuff. Like, I have zero desire to make something look pretty, honestly, or to
Right.
use a style from Figma. I don't want to do that. It's just
No.
like I want the AI to do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I can't stand CSS. I don't know. I don't remember any CSS anymore. Fine, if I had to do a front end, I am totally
Typical
going to rely
backend
on it.
developer. Yeah.
Typical backend developer, whatever. Who cares if it looks pretty? I just want to bake the pig, right?
Yeah, right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
100%. But I'll get AI to do that stuff, and then I'll tweak it enough to sort of make the judgment call. But then when I actually have to build out the functionality, and it's the problem is when I get stuck. Now what? If AI is the only tool in my toolkit, and I'm stuck, I have a problem.
Yeah. When all you got is a hammer, everything's a nail.
Correct. Right. And then how do you get unstuck? And then you lose credibility in the team if you can't ask good questions.
Before I let you go, man, tell me, what are some ways that you've used AI with writing code that works really, really well? Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode, and if you're interested in becoming a software developer, learning how to build complex software, and actually get hired, join me at Parsity.io. If you're serious about joining, just schedule a call with me by clicking the link in the show notes below.
I still go by my original. I think the last time we spoke, also we covered it. For those who missed that episode, go check it out. We talked about some of the rules that I tend to apply when I'm working with AI, which is AI is a team member that I am accountable for, and so I have to put the lens on of I'm working with this AI, and I am accountable for the code that it writes. So if it writes it and it's wrong, that's on me, because I merged it or I sort of let it enter the code base, which means you have to exercise a tech lead mindset with the AI. You've got to know how to review it. If you know enough to review it, then use it as much as you like. But if you don't know enough such that the AI is telling you things that you have no idea about, you would be hesitant, even unless it's someone on your team that's had 5 years of proving themselves. You would not just blindly say, okay, you're saying that, I believe you. You would always want to validate, check the code out, improve it, test it, etc. You want to do all that. So treat it like an employee that you're responsible for, that you're the manager for. Do not delegate things that you do not already know how to do or know enough that you could figure out how to do it, right? If you're delegating things that you have no idea how to do, it's kind of, those startups, Brian, where you have non-technical founders who assuming everything is possible just because they saw it in some AI video, and they think we'll just delegate everything to the AI, and then the engineers are like, it's not going to work.
Yeah, not quite.
Not yet. Exactly. Yeah. So it's that sort of, if you're delegating to the AI and you don't know how to do it, then you're opening up a real Pandora's box of problems. So I think those are broadly the two principles. I use it every day, but I'm very clear that this is a pair programming exercise. This is not you program and I lie in a hammock and sip a pina colada. That's not what's going on. This is pair programming. I'm going to stress test. There's a reason why I talked about this in LinkedIn. There's a reason why it's called Copilot. It's not called Pilot. There's a reason, right? There's a code there. It's meant to be with you. It's meant to be done with you. And there's also a reason why commercial airliners still require a licensed and trained pilot to be up there. Even if they're sleeping, they're required to be up there, even when the plane's on autopilot, because would you get on a plane where the pilot wasn't trained just because autopilot's really good or the AI is really good at flying the plane? No, you'd expect the pilot to be trained. Yeah. It doesn't differ. It doesn't differ here at all,
Okay. Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah, it's funny. We have self-driving cars now, which are also a little scary because I take them for fun in San Francisco. They're awesome. But if I'm in a rush or if I have to go through a sketchy area, I absolutely want a human there because I do not trust it to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Lastly, what is the one AI tool you like using the most for coding?
I'm a big fan of just in the IDE experiences. So I think what both VS Code and Cursor are doing are great. So you don't need to hop around between windows and tabs anymore. You just create it in your IDE. You connect the AI that you want at the back end, whichever one you've got the the key for, or if you're paying for a subscription, then you get some included credits. That's great. I don't really use the ChatGPT interfaces very much. I don't use those interfaces at all. I just do most of it in the AI. In the IDE directly. Moving around. By the way, guys, developers out there, learn to use keyboard shortcuts. I cannot tell you how life-changing they are. Yeah. You set your key bindings up. Do not keep reaching for the mouse all the time. You'll just get so much faster once you get keyboard. Once you start with keyboard shortcuts, you will not go back to moving to the mouse. Like, you'll just be like, oh my God, this is the slowest thing in the world, reaching for the mouse, scrolling across the screen. Like, nah.
That's it. I'm putting my VS Code shortcuts in this episode. If you go to the bottom of the episode, you'll see that, because more of you need to know those.
Oh, 100%. So you can toggle on and off the chat, change modes. You can do all of that with your shortcuts, and that's kind of how I use it, to be honest, Brian. I tend to prefer ChatGPT is really good, so I tend to switch and cycle between Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. These are, and I often will ask the same question of all three.
Okay. Because
as far as I'm concerned, I've just got extra team members. And they give me, especially for things where I'm like, I don't know, I don't know if this is actually going to help me. This answer is going to help me. I ask them questions. I'm like, what have I missed? Review my code and tell me what I could do better. And I can't remember who. It was a really great article where they said that they used a lot of AI and then they stopped because they felt they were getting really rusty. So what they would do now is they will still go through the effort of writing the code themselves, but get the AI to review it. Right. So they still maintain their craftsmanship. Yeah, I think it's a harder way to do it. But it gives you, your hands are still very firmly on the wheel, which I think is really important. Like, I do not want, I posted on this on LinkedIn as well, I do not want vibe flying. I do not want vibe medicine. I do not want vibe surgery. Vibe surgery. I do not want any of these vibes. So why is vibe coding suddenly okay? I do not want vibe lawyering. I do not want vibe judgment. I do not want vibe policing. I don't want vibe anything.
Me neither. We've cheapened this industry too much, I think. We've really cheapened what software engineers do. And I do blame kind of this boot camp era and like the whole like anyone can code thing. I'm like, yeah, I guess like anyone can be president too, or a plumber, or
don't cheapen the effort required.
Don't cheapen that. We've really done a disservice to ourselves, and I'm a little bit glad that era is coming to a close, which is why I think that we're in a good position. If you don't want to be a vibe coder, if you actually want to be a real software engineer and learn how to think through difficult problems,
and that's the thing with what we're doing with Parsity Inner Circle is it's like we have students who don't necessarily want to become software engineers, but they want to have engineering like skills so that they open up this tree of options in front of them, right? And that, I believe, is the right way to think about your future, because none of us can see more than 2 to 3 years out, right? And if you don't have a mix of skills that makes you fairly unique in the marketplace, if you're going to be a commodity in the marketplace, you're kind of in trouble, because the AI will eat up the commodity jobs. It will eat it up. So, that's if for those who want to learn to code, to get better careers, doesn't have to be software engineering. There's no end to the kind of careers you can have by learning to code, just because you'll be more technically minded. Vital skill, right? And that's an advantage.
A much better way to look at it. Yeah, that's a really 100%. Good way to look at it. Like, learn to code and do whatever the hell you want. Like,
the most useful skills. Yeah. Exactly, and this is the beauty of it. Like, the most useful skill I learned, I would not have gotten into software engineering had I not learned sales and how to sell during my startup years. There is no way I would have gotten into a software engineering job, because sales is about identifying the problem that the prospect needs and then solving that problem for them convincingly. How is that different from a job interview? It's literally what a job interview is.
Yeah. That's the reason number, 628 why salespeople tend to make really good career changes into software. Well, Zubin, thank you so much for talking today. I always enjoy speaking with you. I'll speak with you again this week, but it's fun speaking with you on air and going off on this kind of stuff. I have links to all the stuff we chatted about, including the article, in the show notes.
Sounds really good. Thanks for having me, Brian. And in a few weeks, let's try and do some episodes on the interview process and what we're seeing as well. It'll be a fun one.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait for all the hate on that one. Yeah, sounds good.
All right. See you later, man.
See you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you're serious about switching careers and becoming a software developer and building complex software and want to work directly with me and my team, go to Parsity.io. And if you want more information, feel free to schedule a chat by just clicking the link in the show notes. See you next week.